first part of chapter 4, let me ask you this. My goal here is not just to interpret chapter 4. Partly that's a goal, but to try to demonstrate the necessity to do these things together and to raise significant questions and to be sensitive to when there's a question that needs to be ready. Okay? And then not just to raise the question, but to do whatever it takes to get an answer to that question. Now, there are, I have never counted them out, but if we were to ask of all the questions just in this simple exercise that we had to ask ourselves, there had to be, 20 or more questions that we would have to ask ourselves just in this, and that isn't all of them because I'm on page 89 of my notes, but I started on page 80 and I didn't go through it all. So at any rate, hopefully it's somewhat helpful. Now let's look at one of my favorite passages of all in this book, one of them, and that is starting at verse 10, okay, which clearly has a different, a similarity, but a difference in the content. Similarity in content in one sense, but a different context in another. Okay? Now, just in reading verse 10, we can see that without even doing the exegetical thing right off. I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last you have sprung to life. Okay, you're thinking, notice that word, on my behalf. Wherein you were thinking, but you were lacking opportunity. We'll have to deal with the questions those raised. But the issue here in the preceding has been started off with, you can't get your thinking patterns together, right? Okay. So working through how to do that, now at verse 10, he's talking about a time when in fact they were thinking together in regards to him. So it's a positive thing, and he's rejoicing in that. See? And I think in another way, it kind of reinforces the preceding conclusion. He says, I really rejoice very greatly, as a matter of fact, in the Lord, that you're thinking, on my behalf at least, you're thinking the same. And that would suggest that when they get their act together from 2 to 9, that he would be rejoicing in the Lord greatly because they're thinking together the same way. Right? Yeah.
So obviously, in some ways they can be thinking together, in other ways they can't.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. At least on behalf of him, so that at least as far as he is concerned, there's no dispute as to their feelings about him. Right? And notice how he ended in verse 9 was, the things you heard, learned, heard, or received, heard, and saw in me. Right? So in other words, putting himself up here as one point at which they were all in agreement. And he's rejoicing greatly that in regard to him, they're thinking the same thing. Now you notice at verse 10, as it begins, it does begin with a conjunctive, right? I want my summaries here, by the way. I won't read it all, but I got a sectional summaries, preceding section 2 to 3, and 4 to 7, and 8 to 9, to pull together the significant things, and then a divisional summary from 2 to 9, that is, backing off a little further to see the big picture and bringing in some other things. Diagrams and stuff, and then I'm back on to page 90. Okay, so, and that's only the beginning here. I need to redo some of this. And I've got notes of changes already. But at any rate, you'll notice there is a conjunction that begins verse 10. Okay, right? And that's de, and that is a transitional kind of a conjunction. It's not as dramatic of a transition as some other conjunctives could be. So it's one that, in one sense, makes a separation between what is preceding it, okay, but in another sense, carries on a continuation as opposed to a complete break and then a new thought. So there's a continuation involved with this. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly. He said, okay, I rejoice. Oh, I took that as an epistolary aorist. Okay, that's my interpretation after I did the analysis, and then the syntax analysis was epistolary aorist. So I translated in a present English present tense. Okay. So, and I think most translations probably do that. I don't know. I haven't read the other translations. They probably put it in the present. Don't they? They put it in the past.
American Standard put it in the present.
Oh, okay.
KJV put it in the past. New American Standard put it in the past.
Okay, in the past.
NIV is in the present.
In the present, yeah. So that's insignificant, not from the standpoint of going beyond the exegesis to if you're teaching or preaching in a church or a Sunday school class, you got people out there with different translations on this. You see.
As I take a closer look at the NAS, he says, "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me."
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting how the tenses get tossed around a little bit.
I rejoice or rejoiced.
Past tense.
Past
rejoice.
tense. Okay. Mm-hmm.
That now at last.
No, that's right. Yeah. So at any rate,
How did you translate revive? Or
revive, yeah,
is that-
sprung to life. Maybe that's kind of the basic idea.
Did you translate it the same in the same present?
Anatholita,
Yeah.
Athalo. Oh,
Epistolary.
no. Oh, I see what you're saying. No, I've got it's an aorist. Okay, I put that in the past. I rejoice that you have, and now that is he's presently rejoicing. Okay. They have, in the sense that he has in his wallet some of the cash that came his way. put it in a rather crass way, you know. I mean, at this state, they revived their concern because they sent with Epaphroditus money or some means of support, right? And that's historical at that point. Okay, but I don't think that the rejoicing was just simply historical. I rejoiced, you know. He continues to rejoice. I think it's probably epistolary. That first one. That's my interpretation of that. Okay, so, and again, you notice the phrase, I rejoiced in the Lord. Where have we seen that before? We've seen that. I mean, he gave that same terminology in a command just preceding this. So if we're talking about orality here, okay, you know, he said, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice, right? Now, when he changed topic and he changed it to himself, he says, I rejoice in the Lord greatly, right? And so it certainly seems to be another, at least oral connectedness with the context there. It's not, you know, specifically content oriented. Certainly oral content, it connects. Okay. And now at last, you have sprung to life, or have you translated revive. I don't like the idea of I was translated, your concern for me, is something like that. Is that what it said?
Yeah, your concern.
Yeah. I particularly don't like that translation because it obscures the very same structure that was the key in the preceding and has been running through this whole book. That is a thinking process. You know, you're thinking on my behalf. Okay. I think it obscures that, and so somebody studying from the English Bible would not be able to see the running comments running through the book, you know, on this same topic, okay, which I think is probably important. Anyway, I rejoice greatly in the Lord. Let's see, I won't deal with anything there. Let's see. I had a question working through this, and the sense of you have revived, caused a spring into life again. You're thinking on my behalf. Okay. I had a grammatical question on that. No. I guess, what occurred was looking, since that's a term that doesn't occur very much, maybe a hot box of gum, I forgot. I didn't write that in there, but I might have. But I was noticing in the Gloucester-Brunner grammar, and sometimes when there's a question about a verse, but you're not sure, something about this that I'm not quite, I don't know the question to ask. So sometimes you look through the index of large grammar to see if your verse is referenced in any way, okay? And Gloucester-Brunner referenced this particular word, onothalata, in the sense of it's maintaining a causative sense, okay? And so you could go back, and if that's true as far as the word is concerned, well then that would justify going back to the hati, which before we might take it as I rejoiced that you have done such, right? Now, maybe the combination of the verb, a causative connotation with the verb, goes back and look at the whole clause being causative, right? So now I rejoice greatly in the Lord because, right? You have revived, sprung into life again, already now last. You're thinking on my behalf. Okay. So then I went back then and changed the hati, which I previously had, as introducing an object clause into a causal clause, stating the reason why he rejoiced. So sometimes that will happen. In other words, and that would affect the diagram too, you see. Because my diagram would show up differently with an object clause as opposed to a causal clause. So you've got to go back and you readjust things, you see. And so that's what occurred, as I recall, in working through that particular issue. And so, at any rate, notice as well now we work through the direct the thinking that infinitive becomes, a object, if you will, direct object, okay, of the verb. You sprung to life, you're thinking on my behalf. But notice the prepositional phrase. You got the infinitive. The ta goes with the infinitive. That is, the article goes with the infinitive. Okay. Now you got a prepositional phrase that is between the article and the infinitive that it goes with. So you ask the question, why is that there? Why isn't it ta, fran, ein, huper, emu, right? In other words, the infinitive to follow. I mean the prepositional phrase to follow. So there's a question that arises, and what might grow, what significance that might have in the difference between having it there as opposed to on the other side of the infinitive. Okay, well, what it does is emphasizes it a bit. Okay? On my behalf thinking, right? And it might then be kind of a implication by emphasizing it. Maybe an implication that as you have been thinking together in agreement on my behalf, right, just coming from where he was at, maybe the implication could be drawn that, gee, they should be thinking for one another in that light, right? That goes back to chapter 2 in the same frame of reference. Same idea would grow out of thinking the same thing, but then it goes on, and then nothing according to strife or vainglory, which, by the way, we could have used some of that as implying what may be involved in this emotional and intellectual conflict. Okay, but regarding one another better than yourselves, right? Watching out for one another. Be thinking this way in you as also Christ thought, right? So some of that may be implied by pulling that forward. Don't know for sure, but it's a possibility, because it doesn't have to be there. Okay? Now, the bigger question arises, I think, in the whole sense. I mean, wait a minute. What's keeping anybody there thinking good things about it? I mean, you were lacking opportunity. I mean, wait a minute now. We're talking about thinking, right? Okay, so I'm rejoiced in the Lord greatly because now you have sprung back into life. Then again, you are thinking on my behalf, wherein also you were thinking, but you were lacking opportunity. Lacking opportunity to think? What does that mean? What is going on here? You see what I'm saying? I mean, clearly there's a question of, it's not a major grammatical question here. It's a major of application of words. Does thinking mean only thinking? I mean, it's used 3 times here. 1, 2, oh well, 2 times and 1 time implied. Okay. Right. Does thinking only mean thinking? Okay. I mean, because why wouldn't you have an opportunity to think? You always have an opportunity to think. I mean, you could, do that. So obviously, thinking doesn't only mean thinking. In fact, in working through that problem, come Moulton and Milligan, that is, you know what Moulton and Milligan is now, don't you? That's that lexicon that deals with extra-biblical, New Testament words in extra-biblical contexts, letters or whatever out there. Okay, Moulton and Milligan, good one to have. They got an illustration of the concept of thinking, of practical thinking, or not just thinking, but the concept of applying, putting, in our terminology, putting feet to your thoughts. Okay, so they got the idea of practical thinking. That's their terminology, practical thinking. But it's, in other words, we do have a concern about you, but there's nothing we can do about it, right? Gosh, they're 800 miles away, and the flights aren't very regular, okay? So the opportunity comes when? To do something about it comes when? When Epaphroditus volunteers, or however he is enlisted, is then given the cash, traveler's checks, whatever it is, to travel 800 miles or so to go and give it to Paul, right? So the sense in which they were lacking the ability to do anything about their concerns, okay? You were lacking opportunity to do that. So, but then when Epaphroditus came along on the scene, then they no longer lacked that opportunity. And that's so the practical thinking, the product of a concern, an active concern, came to fruition with Epaphroditus. Before that, certainly there could have been concern, but nothing, they couldn't do anything about it. Okay? So the word is used, Moulton Milligan at least, with that idea that there's something, it's something that culminates in a practical expression of it. Okay? So at any rate, that's one way to deal with what seemingly is a strange statement, especially when you translate it the way I did as thinking. In other words, you're lacking opportunity to think. See, there's got to be something more to it than that. And there is. Okay, so that's that particular verse. Now, in relationship to the next verse, there's a connection between the next verse and this verse, even though there's no connective in a specific grammatical sense, okay? It's a connection by way of a syndeton, that is, no connection, grammatical connection, but with a thought connectedness. With the phrase, not that, because now this is how it works. The phrase is, not that, but that. I mean, that's how the thought runs, okay? Not that, but that. So the break is just a break for purposes of explanation. Okay, that's kind of the nature of the syndeton, as you can find in Bollinger. That's one of the examples of that, syndeton. And now let's continue on then in dealing with other issues that occur in verse 11. Now we know that there's possibility of logical connectedness. It's not grammatical, other than not that. We can deal with not that or not because, if you like. Okay. But then I am speaking. So now he's talking in the present. I am speaking. But he's got literally according to poverty or lack. Okay. Now that phrase is pulled forward. Okay. So in a sense, the emphasis point is there. I am not speaking because of poverty or in relationship. Because of poverty is probably the best way to do that, or need, if you like. Okay? Okay? It's a word that doesn't occur very much, that particular word. In fact, only occurred one other time. That's in Mark. Okay? It differs from another word. Now here's where grammar falls into play again. See, this is one of these words, we're not sure exactly what it means, only occurs twice, right? So we take it apart, tu storesen. Well, one of the things we find is that when we look at the etymology of it, that is the breakdown of it, or the pieces of it, the cis ending, okay? There is another word that is in use which has a ma ending. Okay, in other words, it's the same basic root, but two different endings. Okay, one of them with a ma ending would be passive, if you will, and the other one is active, more of an active connotation involved in these words. Okay, so, but then in looking through the lexical data related to all of that, those two words and I'm not sure if I ever looked up Luo and Oneida in this regard, but the word with the ma ending, involves a passive sense in looking at that which is lacking, okay, as opposed to the experience of not having. Okay, you see what I'm saying? In other words, one sense with one ending, you're looking at the idea of continuing in a poverty-stricken state. You know, the other side of it, in the passive ending, you're looking at the absence of that which would keep you from being in a poverty-stricken state. Okay? In other words, he would be saying in this sense, I'm not speaking because I don't have enough, right? As opposed to, I'm not speaking because I didn't get enough. Okay? You see what I'm saying? In other words, my experience is one of not having enough. But that's not why I'm speaking. I'm not speaking because I don't have enough. Okay? Now let's just move on and just show you some of the difficulties that we're faced with all of a sudden here. Okay. For I now, in the gar clause, he's trying to explain himself here now. Okay. Normally, you note when you have a ukati like this, then you want to see a Allah, but that opposite, right? Well, it hasn't occurred yet, so maybe it'll occur later, right? I mean, so let's continue on. Now, gar. Now, gar is now going to be used to explain what he just got done saying. Not that I'm speaking because of what I don't have, that is my poverty state here. Okay. For he says then, in explanation, I have learned, aorist, in those situations I am to be content. Now, when you work with or you run into a relative pronoun, you got to parse it, right? And part of parsing then is to identify the antecedent. Well, the parsing for this is neuter dative plural. Okay. What's in my, so the antecedent then would be, well, you say neuter plural at least, right? Okay. What in the context is neuter plural? It can't be prior to verse 11, because there's been a break. Ascendanton does that for me. Okay. So it can't be that what in the preceding is the, what is the antecedent for this? Okay. There's a problem here. And the problem is I can't find one. So why does he use a pronoun that doesn't have what seems to be an identifiable antecedent? Now we're into what kind of a problem? Huh? What? Grammatical problem. Okay? So where do I go to solve this issue, to try to find an answer to this? A grammar. You go to a large grammar or a small grammar?
Go to the bigger one.
In an issue like this, it's obvious that the grammars, even the intermediate grammars like Wallace, okay, deals with pretty common grammatical issues, and it doesn't deal with what appears to be anomaly or, you know, real sticky wickets that we might say. Okay, so go to the large grammar. You go to the large grammar to try to figure out what about the antecedent for plural relative pronouns when there is no antecedent for it? What do you know, the use of plural pronouns without an antecedent. And you do some various searching. Now there's a number of ways to do that searching in a large grammar, especially one by Robertson, which is the one I recommend. But one is go back to the index in the back of the book, the index that has the verses, look up your verse. And I have probably 7 or 8 different page numbers. So then go to the index in the front of the book and match the index, the number in the back of the book with the topic in the front of the book at that page number. Sooner or later you're going to find out, yeah, there's one that may coordinate. In other words, we're dealing with pronouns here. Okay, relative pronouns, all right, this will work. So I'll look that one up. And if you're lucky, then you will find that, in fact, he will be discussing the issue. You could say also another thing you could do is go to commentaries. Okay, now look for commentaries. Lo and behold, when you have real problems, they went on vacation. They took a coffee break down in Arizona. That's what happened to them.
They had a publisher date to get.
Huh?
They had to get the thing done.
Yeah,
Publisher.
right. Very often they don't solve the problem at all, okay? But at any rate, in searching through enough things, this is the key thing here, we find not only in the grammar, but we also find in, lo and behold, in what you would not expect to look at in a grammatical problem with the BDAG. What in BDAG would I be looking for? A relative pronoun. Look up under relative pronoun, in this case it would be Haas, and it'll have quite a number of columns there, and you'll see if is there anything in that suggests this kind of an issue here, okay? Well, not only in the grammar, but in the BDAG, it says this, and it uses the en hois, not necessarily just my verse, okay, but it says this, quote, connects with the situation described in what precedes. So now the antecedent is not a word, It's an idea or a preceding thought. Now I'm going to my large grammar to confirm the fact that is that possible? That in fact this antecedent could be not a word, okay, with which it would agree in number and gender, but with a thought, a preceding thought, okay? And that's what you would discover. Yes, that is possible. And what is the situation in the preceding that is talked about? Well, there's only one situation that precedes this that is talked about. It's not his speaking, it's his poverty situation. That's it. Okay? So then it gets translated differently now. Not that I am speaking because of poverty. Okay? For I have learned in those poverty situations I find myself to be content. Okay? All right? Okay, now he got hung up, however. Now he's hung up. And he doesn't have an eraser that works well with papyri here. Okay? Okay? We know he's hung up because of what happens that follows. And what he just said was, I've learned to be content in those situations where in those poverty situations I find myself. Is that the only time he learned to be content? You see, he's thinking now. I mean, you can just see Paul at this point. And you can see, when he wrote that down, he said, let's see. I didn't quite say that right the way I wanted to say that. It's not just when I don't have enough. I also get contented when I have more than enough. Right? You can just see that. Now notice some of the details of the text that occur, okay, that follow this. I mean, we don't make our conclusions at this stage, but we're just following through things. Now wait a minute. I'm going to come back, jump around a little bit here. I'm just initially going to work on this one problem, okay? I'm going to come back because there's words that need to be done. But notice verse 12, we'll come back to the business about contentment here. But verse 12, again, begins without a conjunction. The chi, you say, is there. But no, that chi is in the wrong place. Now my question is, what's this chi doing in the wrong place? You see, I know chi to be humble, that is, to have less than enough. I know chi, to abound. It's not a both and deal. That would not be in the location. See, the position is wrong. Okay, so now I go to my Arndt and Gingrich again, or my bag, if you like. Okay. And you search under chi on all those 5 massive columns or something, you see, and you try to figure out what in the world is this doing here when it's clearly not functioning as a simple conjunctive here. So you can eliminate that section altogether and go and see what else we have. And then we find this statement, at least, and then you can also confirm this in grammar, by the way. You find this statement that says, we may indeed have chi in both parts of the comparison, a studied balancing of the two members of the sentence. And that not only do I get an indication in B-dag of that, not quite stay that way, confirming what B-dag suggests, I go to Robertson and I found this statement here. Okay, that what he's saying is sometimes chi occurs not in speedy writing, if you will, okay. It occurs in a situation that seems out of place, okay. It's a studied balancing. I mean, it's a situation where you can almost see in your mind. Paul got hung up in verse 11, okay. I need a cup of coffee. Goes for a cup of coffee. How much? I got to think this. What did I really want to say that I didn't get said and got hung up on? Okay? Well, what I really wanted to say was, it's not only when I don't have enough. That's what he just got saying here. Okay, but I also know how to be content when I have more than enough. Right? And then no conjunction again. again, this is now a syndeton that Bullinger will, and this is figurative language issues now, Bullinger. Okay, Bullinger would say another use, continued use of this syndeton is explanatory purposes or even appositional concepts. In this case, it seems to be somewhat appositional. He said, now I know indeed to have less than enough, I know also, or indeed to have more than enough, in every and in all situations. I have learned the secret, that's translation from B-Dag. Both, now we got a both and, now we're comfortable with Kai. Okay, they're back into my world again, right? Both to be, have more than enough, satisfied, and to be hungry. Both to abound, have more than enough, and to be in want. Now there's my words, a verbal form of the very thing that hung me up at the beginning, you see, right? Right? Then verse 13, as far as all situations, and situations are what in this context?
Plenty and want.
Okay, having less than enough or having more than enough. In all these situations, then we got to deal with this fuel, because now it doesn't make any sense to say I can do all things. That's ridiculous in this context. Okay? It doesn't have any sense. Well, we'll come back to it. Okay. All right. So all of a sudden, what happened here? Now look, we're doing piece by piece. We're doing all of our exegetical work, looking for all the data, and what happened to us? We got hung up because Paul got hung up. We got hung up. I need that drink. We got hung up on the grammatical issue that Paul got hung himself up on, right? Okay? But that grammatical issue now is being worked. Now he's beginning to work that problem out from verses 12, and verse 12 in particular, right? The conclusion is verse 13 in a sense. Okay? Right? Follow me so far? Okay, now we can go back and see something else now about this. We say, okay, look, there are at least three things involved here at this stage of what happened here in this verse 11. One has to do with this business of poverty, okay? But then he said he learned something, and he learned in all these kind of situations to be content. He's expanded now the concept of the situation from poverty situations to any and all situations. Okay? He's expanded that very dramatically. I mean, repeated himself here. To have less than enough, to have more than enough, in any and all situations, to be hungry, to be satisfied, to be hungry, to have more than enough, to be in want. He's expanded that. That's what he wanted to say initially. Right? Also, though, in that situation, I learned, he said in verse 11. That's montano. There's your common word for learning. Okay? But now there's another word for learning in verse 12. And that's a perfect form of muleo here. The muleo. Okay? That's another word. Okay? The word for learning that has to do with learning, and in fact it translates out as I have learned the secret, according to B-Dag. And that's a word that grows out of the mystery religions. Okay, now I'm into the historical issue here. A word study that is tied to a mystery religion concept here. And then you understand the mystery religion, and what does that mean? Well, in the mystery religion, you go through various sequences of things, okay? A process, learning this and learning that. But ultimately, when you get to that top point, the high point, say, in this struggle for connection with the deity, you see, you get your secret word, if you will, and you get your secret vision. But the thing about the mystery religion is you can't tell anybody about it. Okay, but you have arrived, but you just can't talk about it. You can't talk about your secret message, and you can't talk about what you saw. Okay, that's the mystery aspect of mystery religions here. Well, he uses that term from the mystery religions here. Okay, but he puts it in a perfect, and by the way, you can search that out, not only through B. Dagg, of course, and through Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, but also Liddell and Scott, some of those other lexicons. So this would be one of those words that you would do a good full-blown word study on to get the full grasp of it. But he also puts it in the perfect tense. I mean, before it was just an aorist. I learned to be content, right? Now, what does he mean? What is the sense? What is the meaning of that learning in the perfect tense? How does that change things? What's the difference between I learned aorist and I have learned the secret perfect? What would be the difference?
He, at least up to the point where he wrote this, he still had that knowledge.
That knowledge. Okay, not only did he learn something, but he's still living in light of what he learned, right? I mean, it's still an ongoing factor in his life. So he said, I learned something. What happened is that memuemai here, that perfect moel here, is expanding, just like the preceding clauses, enough, more than enough, any and all situations, expanded poverty into all situations, not just poverty situations. So now, mueo in its perfect form here expands the general word learning into a different kind of a statement. He's learned a secret of something, and he's living in light of it, if you will. Okay? I mean, he still is on the very much involved in what he has learned. Okay, and through all of his poverty situations. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, verse 11, he got hung up. We already mentioned that. In his explanation, he talked about learning, and now that's expanded. Living in light of this, and he used mystery religion background for this. He talked about poverty situations, which he expanded and explained by saying, oh no, not just poverty, but also I want to have more than enough. Okay. Now we got one other word in verse 11. That business of content. What in the world is all that about? Now we need to do a word study there too. Okay. Because we look at BDAG and whatever, and we find out that in fact that word content, out of our case, is not related to a mystery religion, but it's related to another philosophy of the day. Matter of fact, the primary competition to Christianity philosophically in Paul's day. And what was that? Anybody know?
Buddhism, Stoicism.
No.
Is it Stoicism?
Stoicism. That's right. Stoic philosophy. And that was a primary competition factor. Okay? As a matter of fact, it's a very interesting thing. That is Seneca. You know who Seneca is. I mean, he's a Stoic philosopher. He lived in Rome. He was in Rome and the primary Stoic teacher. At the same time, Paul was in prison. I'm pretty sure, though I can't prove this, I'm pretty sure that Paul and Seneca had bumped into one another and he was in jail and he had philosophical discussions. I'm pretty sure of that. But anyway, I can't prove that, of course. But it makes sense. At any rate, since they were there at the same time, both of them philosophers, etc. But at any rate, this idea, though, the concept of this word, which we often translate as content, is really the basic idea there is self-sufficiency. That's the primary meaning. So now we're talking about a word study, a complete blown word study here. Okay, let's get this full sense of this thing. The primary sense is self-sufficiency. Content, which is often translated, is an extension of that. The primary idea is self-sufficiency. Okay? And in the Stoic concept, what that means is this, in the religion, or that philosophy, is that I am experiencing this if, in fact, I'm in complete control and nothing external of myself can affect me. Okay? Let me illustrate with a real mundane illustration. You know. Let's use an economic illustration. The Stoic, Seneca, he goes to the mailbox one day, and he opens the mailbox, and there's a letter from the IRS saying you'll, $12,000 to the IRS. Not if he's succeeded in his philosophy. He's not affected internally by that external. He's not bothered by that. He's not in grief or in pain. He's not yelling and screaming. He's not cussing and swearing. It just doesn't affect him if he's succeeded in his philosophy. Right? Next day, let's say, he goes to the mailbox and he opens it up. Another letter from the IRS saying we made a mistake. We owe you $10,000. Right? If he succeeded in his philosophy, it doesn't affect him. Okay? Nothing external of himself can take him off of center. Okay? That's a success. Now the reality is, no Stoic ever made it, Okay? Okay?
Clint Eastwood.
What about Clint Eastwood?
What?
Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood.
That's one of the movies, yeah.
But the thing is now, here, if he uses that term and using it in a context, similar kind of a context of a Stoic philosopher there, okay, what he is saying is, I have achieved it. I've learned the secret, I'm living in light of it, and I have achieved it. In other words, the secret is to get along just fine with less than enough, and get along just fine with more than enough. See? Because the secret lies within himself. That's his difference. Now the question in the text, though, is this. I've expanded learning with Buell. I've expanded poverty situations to any and all situations. Is there an explanation for an expansion of autarkes, or this self-sufficiency contentment word? Yes, there is. It's in verse 13, at least as a possibility. Now, all things, panta goes back to the initial problem. In all situations, economic situations, that's what it relates to there. In this context, you can't say, any and everything in life, as it's often used. Okay, but school, does this mean I can do a word study with school from the standpoint of, from BDAG, the function of the word, it can be used transitively and intransitively. Transitively meaning it takes an object, intransitively it doesn't take an object. Usually translated how?
Strong and able.
Able.
Okay, able to do something, they usually put in there, right?
Able to do.
Okay, that's transitively where it takes an object, right? Iskuo, intransitively, would not be taking an object, it would just be simply mean, I am strong, okay? With respect to any and all economic situations, I am strong, that is. Content, that's expansion of content. But how is he doing that? Because he has control of himself like a Stoic, never going to be bothered? No. He's strong in the one who strengthens me. Of course, there's a textual problem we won't talk about right now, but that's, that's relates to, what does the text go? Where does the text go? Oh, Christ, yeah, in Christ is strengthens me, right? Yeah, what the textual problem. So what he's saying, if that's an accurate breakdown of the problem here, okay, then autarkes is expanded in verse 13. 13 doesn't mean to be able to do anything. It means, as far as all these economic situations, I am strong in Christ, or in Him who gives me strength. So what he's saying as he's talking with Seneca is, I have succeeded where you haven't. I have succeeded not because of myself, but because of my connection with Christ. That's why I can succeed in this. So I am not bothered when I don't have enough. I can manage that, and I'm not bothered when I have more than enough. I can manage that, right? So, and interestingly enough, just to confirm the fact that what we have in verses 12 and 13 is a breakout, an explanation really, of verse 11, is the fact of something that never shows up. And what is that?
Oh, the call it, or the all.
The but clause.
Yeah,
Not that, but that. He never got there because he got hung up, right? Now he's explained himself and he's off of that topic. Okay, how? And I mentioned this before, I think, where it's supposed to, the way in which it's supposed to show up is in verse 17. Not that I am seeking the gift, but I am seeking something else. Right? That's a grammatical breakout of it. So at any rate, just without going into too much farther, I'll just have to leave it, I guess, at that point. There's other good things in this passage that we could deal with, especially verse 19, that people screw up all the time. Okay? But it's in the same economic context, too. You know, is the fact that what we wanted to show is that if you don't do your hard work of just simply diagramming, analysis, asking all the right questions, what's the case, what's the function of this case, what's the antecedent, there's all kinds of data you will not see. You don't see data, this data, you don't understand the text at all. You can't understand the text at all. Okay? Yeah.
Going back to the concept of strength,
Yeah.
and his ability to handle the situations, if he was not associating himself with the one that would approve of those things, he wouldn't have the strength to get through it.
Right, that's what VDAG says. It says it's what strength humility has and requisite personal resources to accomplish something through a personal relationship, like you were mentioning, is walking with the Lord.
Yeah, if I understand what you just said there. Strength resides not within himself, but in his relationship with Christ. Is that, I believe?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking as we try to explain or contextualize this into talk to somebody else and help them understand how this relates to us.
Oh, okay.
This concept of, well, yeah, he can do the things, when he's involved in the ministry, doing these things not for selfish ambition.
Now let's, okay.
I mean, that's what I'm wondering, how are we going to get this across besides just, we can explain don't be overly excited or overly depressed.
Okay, now let's start with the basic exegetical. Now we're going into that contextualization question we had before. Okay, number one, on the exegesis of this passage, that is, what it's talking about is economic situations. It's an economics context. So it doesn't talk about, you can be strong and go skydiving,
Yeah.
You can be strong and you can relate positively to this person that you're angry with. You can be strong, Christ. The issue here is economic context. Okay, so its primary application, and even in our context, is economic context. Okay, that's the primary thing here. Okay. Now, is there any way to break farther away from that and still have a legitimate application, even though it's not the exact interpretation of the economic context? Is there any basis to do that? That's your question. Okay. And I would say, if you can sustain that truth apart from this passage, then you can see that it can extend in that direction. But to imply that it's the primary application is to misapply the Scriptures. And you might misapply it because you've never exegeted it and therefore never understood it. Or you've depended upon translations, all of which take it wrongly, almost all, I think. Okay? And therefore they just never grasp it. Okay? And the reality is, hey, even if you translated that I can do all things in Christ, well, that's a lie. I can't do all things. Right? So all things must not mean all things. So I'm able to do must not mean I can able to do. in Christ, well, maybe that doesn't have any meaning either then. Or actually, they don't even translate it in Christ. They translate it through Christ, the means whereby I can do all things. That's how they often translate it, through Christ, which is probably not the best way to do it.
KJV,
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but let's start. Let's at least start with the primary application.
Sure. I was just thinking, as we integrate this, I mean, we've done a lot of integrating all the exegetical methods, but we haven't got to the point where we can, hand it off to a student in a junior high or high school class that, reads this and, oh, hooray, I can do my test now. Well, no, I can't. Sorry.
But what that would mean in application, if you're going to extend it, is I'm not going to be bothered if I flunk the test or if I pass the test. I won't be affected.
Might have a couple parents if you teach that.
Well, you see my point,
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've got this great exegesis,
But the question, I guess my question is this. Look, if you're looking for an application that has to do with something relating to the ability to handle difficulties in life, okay, that doesn't relate to economics, why use this passage?
sure.
Why not find one that deals with another passage? Okay, which takes me to
Verse 19.
huh?
Which takes me to verse 19.
No, well, which takes me to a similar problem in verse 19, question I have. God shall supply all your need according to His wealth in glory in Christ Jesus. Well, that's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful platitude, okay, until I need a can of beans. Okay, where is my beans that He's going to supply? Well, it says it's His wealth. Okay, yeah, He owns a lot of beans. Okay, where is it? In glory.
Don't.
Do I have to die first? In glory in Christ. Okay. Well, we haven't had time to exegete that passage fully, but let me give you my conclusion on this. Okay. In glory in Christ. What does that phrase mean? In fact, the combination of phrases mean. Okay. Conclusion would be that in glory, in which context he's talking about, and it's still in economics context here, God's wealth is located within the context of His own self-revelation, which is Christ in the world, which is the church, which the technical term in Paul is in Christ, in glory. That is that place where He revealed Himself in the world. And it's in Christ. So the bottom line is this, that people don't use properly, is that if in fact I need a can of beans, God can supply it. But where is it? Well, it's located, physically located in the context of the Christian community. That's where it is. He can supply it, but He uses the Christian community to supply that. Okay? That's not how it's often used. It's used in the sense of, don't bother me, God will supply all your needs, right? Be warm, be filled, get lost, that kind of a thing. And that's, unfortunately, kind of misconstrued, I'm afraid, that verse as well. There's a lot of things we could say beyond this, I guess. My main point here in doing all this is to try to demonstrate the issue of integrating all of these things. And I'm hoping that come across, regardless whether you accept or reject everything I've said at an interpretation level, at least see the necessity of asking the questions, dealing with issues as they come up. Okay, because in fact, if we didn't deal with them in the order, then we would never got to these things. Okay, I mean, if you didn't deal with the problem of Enhois in verse 11, you would have never asked the right questions at verse 12. Right? You never would have got there. Okay, and you never would be able to see that the three issues in verse 11 are broken out in 12, 13. You never see that very well, not easily. Okay, so you got to do that in order. Okay, hopefully next term we will have opportunity to practice some of that. Right?
Right.
Yeah, see, somebody on my side. God's side, I should say. Questions? You can cut off.